For decades, America prided itself on being the land of opportunity, the place where dreams came true. But that's a thing of the past. Today, all you can see is mass deportation plans, border shutdowns, visa restrictions. The United States isn't just tightening immigration, it's declaring an all-out war on it. What happened to the country that once said, "Give me your tired, you're poor"? Why is the nation built by immigrants suddenly changing course? Let's rewind for a second. America has always had a complicated relationship with immigration, but for the most of modern history, the story was pretty consistent. Immigrants came, they worked, they built stuff, they became American. It was the promise that made America, well, America. Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to 3 million undocumented immigrants in 1986. George W. Bush pushed comprehensive immigration reform. Even Barack Obama, who deported more people than any president before him, still created DACA to protect kids brought here illegally. The bipartisan consensus was clear. Immigration was mostly good, we just needed to manage it better. But somewhere between then and now, that consensus completely shattered. And I'm not talking about the usual political theater we see every election cycle. I'm talking about a fundamental shift in how Americans view immigration itself. The land of opportunity is having an identity crisis, and the consequences are spilling across every state, every community, every dinner table conversation in America. So, what broke? What turned immigration from one of America's greatest strengths into its most divisive weakness? Between October 2019 and June 2024, US Border Patrol encountered nearly 11 million unauthorized migrants trying to enter the country. 11 million. That's roughly the entire population of North Carolina trying to cross the border in just 5 years. In December 2023 alone, border officials encountered over 370,000 people. That's more than 12,000 people every single day, or 8 people every minute, around the clock. It wasn't just a surge, it was a tsunami. The numbers were staggering. But here's what made it different from previous waves: the sheer volume and the complete mismatch between arrivals and processing capacity. Immigration courts, which were already backed up, suddenly had over 3.7 million pending cases by the end of 2024. That's triple what it was in 2019. Judges are drowning with average caseloads of 5,000 cases each. Some asylum seekers are waiting over 6 years just for their first hearing. Border towns like El Paso, McAllen, and Brownsville became pressure cookers. But the problem didn't stay at the border. Governors like Greg Abbott in Texas started busing undocumented migrants to cities like New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Suddenly, the border crisis became everyone's crisis. And that's when liberal America discovered something uncomfortable. Good intentions don't pay for hotel rooms. Politics is downstream from reality, and the reality was hitting hard. By 2024, immigration had become the #1 issue for voters, more important than the economy, more divisive than abortion, more urgent than any of the conflicts raging across the globe. Donald Trump doubled down on immigration like his political life depended on it, and honestly, it did. His promise to carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history wasn't just campaign rhetoric. It was a direct response to what millions of Americans were seeing and feeling in their communities. Even Democrats started shifting right on immigration. Joe Biden, who campaigned on being the anti-Trump on immigration, ended up implementing some of the toughest asylum restrictions in decades. In June 2024, his administration essentially shut down asylum processing when border encounters got too high. The same Joe Biden who once called Trump's border policies inhumane. But this policy was too late, and criminal smuggling organizations simply adjusted and only allowed enough people to cross without triggering the processing shutdown. Public opinion followed the shift. Gallup polling showed that by 2024, 55% of Americans wanted immigration decreased, the highest level in nearly 2 decades. Even in traditionally liberal cities, support for restrictions was growing. This wasn't just about Republicans anymore. The entire political center of gravity had moved. But if the politics were shifting, what was driving that shift? What were Americans actually experiencing? Wait, if you're finding this interesting, good, that's the point. We cut through the noise and show how politics really shapes your life. Want to stay ahead on the stories that matter? Crime, economics, and why even liberal cities are shifting? Hit subscribe. Alright, back to the video. While the data consistently shows that immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, commit crimes at lower rates than native-born Americans, with a Stanford study looking at 150 years of data, finding that immigrants today are 60% less likely to be incarcerated than people born in the US. But politics isn't about data. It's about perception, and the perception was being shaped by high-profile cases that dominated headlines. The murders of Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student, and Jocelyn Nungere, a 12-year-old child, both by undocumented Venezuelan immigrants let in by the Biden administration, became a rallying cry for immigration restrictions. Stories about MS-13 gang members, Venezuelan gang activity in apartment complexes, and violent crimes committed by recent arrivals filled news cycles. The reality is complex, but the narrative was simple. More immigrants equals more danger. Social media amplified every incident, every arrest, every tragic story. The algorithm doesn't care about statistical significance, it cares about engagement. And nothing drives engagement quite like fear. But even if the crime fears were overblown, there was another problem that was very real: the money. See, America needs immigrants, like desperately needs them. The US birth rate is below replacement level and has been for years. Without immigration, the American workforce would be shrinking just as baby boomers retire in massive numbers. Immigrants fill critical roles across the economy. About 40% of farm workers are undocumented, 1 in 5 construction workers. They're overrepresented in healthcare, food service, and hospitality. During the pandemic, many of them were essential workers. The tech industry? Forget about it. Without immigrants, Silicon Valley would collapse overnight. But here's the economic paradox that's driving so much resentment. While immigrants contribute enormously to the economy overall, their immediate fiscal impact can be negative, especially at the local level. Undocumented immigrants often work in cash economies or use fake or stolen social security numbers, meaning they may not pay income taxes but still use public services like emergency rooms and schools. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that undocumented immigrants contribute about $12 billion annually in state and local taxes, but the cost of services they use, especially education and emergency healthcare, vastly exceeds that number, especially in high immigration areas. It's a classic case where the benefits are broadly distributed, but the costs are locally concentrated. And nowhere was this concentration more visible than in America's biggest cities. New York City spent $4.2 billion in fiscal year 2024 alone on migrant services. $4.2 billion. That's more than the entire budgets of some states. Chicago expects to spend over $275 million. Even smaller cities like Denver are looking at costs of $24 million and climbing. Mayor Eric Adams of New York City, a Democrat who once welcomed immigrants with open arms, started sounding like a border hawk. "Our compassion is limitless, but our resources are not," he said while implementing budget cuts and hiring freezes. The same Eric Adams who campaigned on being a sanctuary city mayor. Schools in immigrant-heavy districts suddenly had to hire Spanish-speaking teachers they couldn't afford. Hospital emergency rooms became de facto immigration processing centers. Homeless shelters designed for local populations were overflowing with asylum seekers who couldn't legally work while waiting for their cases to be processed. The cruelest irony is that many of these cities had declared themselves sanctuary cities, places that would protect immigrants from federal enforcement. But when Texas Governor Greg Abbott called their bluff and started busing migrants directly to their doorstep, the noble rhetoric crashed into fiscal reality. Chicago started housing migrants in police stations. New York opened tent cities. Denver talked about limiting services. The American immigration system had effectively become a shell game, where the federal government sets policy, but local governments pay the bill. And that's when the political class decided enough was enough. What we're witnessing now isn't just policy adjustment, it's a complete philosophical reversal. The Trump administration returned to office with a mandate for the most aggressive immigration enforcement in American history. By February 2025, border encounters had fallen to historic lows, just 8,300 apprehensions, the lowest since 2000. But that wasn't enough. ICE arrests, mass raids, military-assisted deportation flights, and the revival of family detention centers were just the beginning. Then came Alligator Alcatraz. Deep in the Florida Everglades, less than 50 miles from Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, workers transformed an abandoned airport runway into a makeshift tent city designed to hold up to 3,000 migrants. The nickname was coined by Florida's Attorney General, who boasted that if anyone escaped, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons. The optics are intentionally harsh. Migrants housed in FEMA trailers and soft-sided tents in sweltering heat, surrounded by one of America's most dangerous ecosystems. Critics called it engineered to enact suffering. Supporters called it secure and cost-effective. Both sides had a point. The administration shut down the CBP One app that allowed migrants to request asylum appointments. They terminated temporary protected status for over 1 million people who entered illegally, but were given legal status by the Biden administration. Work visa applications became harder to approve. Even legal immigrants faced increased scrutiny and delays. But it goes beyond enforcement. Congress appropriated $170 billion in additional funding for immigration enforcement, more than most foreign militaries. ICE became the most funded federal law enforcement agency in history. The message was clear. America was losing the door, and it was closing hard. But here's the question that's keeping policy experts up at night. What kind of country is America becoming? This isn't just about borders or budgets or even votes. This is about America's soul. For 250 years, immigration has been the secret source of American success. America has become the place where the world's ambitious, desperate, and hopeful came to reinvent themselves. It's literally what made the US exceptional. But exceptional doesn't mean easy. The current system is genuinely broken. When it takes 6 years to get an asylum hearing, when cities go bankrupt housing people who can't legally work, when public opinion turns against immigration because the process appears chaotic and unfair, that's a system failure, not a moral failure. The real tragedy is that we're treating this as a zero-sum game. Either we're compassionate or we're secure. Either we're pro-immigrant or pro-American worker. Either we have open borders or we have mass deportations. But the smart money says the future belongs to countries that figure out how to be both welcoming and selective, how to attract the talent they need while maintaining public support, how to be generous without being naive. The question isn't whether America will continue to be shaped by immigration. It will, because demographics is destiny and the global economy demands mobility. The question is whether America will shape that immigration intelligently or let it shape us chaotically. So, here we are, America, the nation of immigrants, at war with immigration itself. The country that once promised opportunity to the world's tired and poor, now asking whether it has room for anyone at all. Immigration built America, but right now, it might also be what tears it apart. The numbers are staggering, the costs are real, the politics are toxic, and the human stakes couldn't be higher. What do you think? Should America double down on the crackdown, or is there a smarter path forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dives on policies and power plays shaping your future, hit that subscribe button. I've been your host Nick, thank you for watching.